So, we were talking about the theme of repression and longing, and also that how that world, the turn of the century New York aristocratic world, it operated through a set of codes, codes in terms of behavior. There was behavioral patterns. It's almost like an anthropological study. If you read The Age of Innocence, it reads like an anthropological study. So, behavioral codes, you have codes of speech, how people should speak and when they should be silent. So, there are a lot of things that remain unsaid, but they are understood because people belong to the same set of society. So, if you know that these things should be left best left unuttered or unsaid, then they would do that. They wouldn't spell out those words. So, but at the same time, because of so much of codification of behavior and speech and acts, society became very repressed. So, repression is a recurring motif in the works of both Henry James and Edith Wharton. Many people consider Edith Wharton as a much superior writer because of her relative accessibility. Henry James you have already seen, okay, he indulges in obscurantism. Okay, here too you will find she says a lot, but all clothed in irony and sarcasm. So, that makes it a little bit more accessible to an average reader. Now, I am on chapter 3, and for me this is page 17, and I will just read out a small section and then we will discuss this. It invariably happened in the same way. Mrs. Julius Beaufort, on the night of her annual ball, never failed to appear at the opera. Indeed, she always gave her ball on an opera night in order to emphasize her complete superiority to household cares and her possession of a staff of servants competent to organize every detail of the entertainment in her absence. The Beaufort's house was one of the few in New York that possessed a ballroom. It antedated even Mrs. Manson Mingott's and the Headley Cheveresses. And at a time when it was beginning to be thought provincial to put a crash over the drawing room floor and move the furniture upstairs, the possession of a ballroom that was used for no other purpose and left for 364 days of the year to shuttered darkness with its gilt-chaired stacked in a corner and its chandelier in a bag, this undoubted superiority was felt to compensate for whatever was regrettable in the Beaufort past. So, money compensates a lot of things. What is she saying here? What is Edith Wharton telling us? The presence of Mrs. Julius Beaufort. Her first name is Regina Dallas. So, she is the aristocrat. Julius Beaufort, who arrived from nowhere. Okay, so one fine day under very mysterious conditions he arrives from England with a letter of recommendation that is given to him by Mrs. Mingott's son, who is in England, or Mrs. Mingott's son-in-law rather, who is in England, who is a banker in England. He arrives with a letter of recommendation and he is initiated in the society, and he marries one of the most renowned, a girl from the most renowned families of America, of New York society, of upper class society. Now, what does this little passage about Regina Beaufort's presence at a ball on the night, at an opera on the night of a ball, what does it indicate? She is present there at the opera. You know which opera I am talking about, the opera where Christine Nielsen is singing Faust, where New York society, the entire society is gathered there. They have arrived there in their brown coupes and Landos and their Brohams, and they are there. Okay, and this provides a lot of this provides a setting for getting introduced to the major characters in the novel, okay, and how they behave, and the coded secret behavior that is part of the accepted norms. Now, the presence of Mrs. Julius Beaufort at the night of a ball in her own house, what does this signify?
It's the Beaufort brand of decadence, so that it makes them both attractive and also repulsive to the other people.
Okay.
They have a very peculiar relationship with the Beauforts.
It's a love-hate relationship. Okay, they don't want them, but at the same time they are fascinated by the presence of such exceptionally superior, such exceptionally wealthy people, and who are so much superior to them in terms of wealth and monetary status. Where that money comes from, no one is very certain, no one is very clear. But the very fact that Mrs. Julius Beaufort is able to attend an opera where the entire society has assembled, at the same time she can also organize a ball at her home. Okay, a ball is a big party, you know what a ball means. So, at the same, so the hostess being at an opera at the time, within 30 minutes her ball is going to start and she is still attending in the opera. Why? Because she is signifying her superiority over domestic matters. She is so much in control, that is what we are told, that even if she is away from home, the ball will be operated, conducted very smoothly. She does not have to fuss around the home. There are people, she has a retinue of staff who will take care of all these things, and that sort of gives her an edge over the rest of the New York society. And also the description of their house somewhere, which has the distinction, unique distinction of having its own ballroom, okay, which is only a ballroom and not a big living room. Rest of the New York society, that is what they had. They had a large living room which would also double as a ballroom whenever the need arises. But here in this house they have an exclusive ballroom, okay, and this is the final touch of superiority, the financial superiority. So, this is the kind of society that we are talking about. Now, Henry James and Edith Wharton and some of the other major works by Edith Wharton. See, we were already talking about how she started her career rather late. She started publishing rather late, but once she started, she became very prolific, and then she published Glimpses of the Moon in 1923, The Children in 1928, and then one of her most famous, one of her most beloved works is Ethan Frome, which was published in 1911. The Reef is another story about suppressed longings and repressed behavior, which was published in 1912. Now, from here we will move on to talk about the concept of the novel of manners. The other day I asked you what is novel of manners, and I just gave you example, an extract from The Age of Innocence, ballroom, okay, attending operas, throwing big parties. This is all a part, a convention of a particular section of society. So, novel of manners relates to or suggests a kind of novels that recreate a social world conveying the finely detailed observations of the customs, values and modes of a highly developed and complex society. And New York society in the late 19th century and early 20th century, and also the British society for several centuries, it remained a highly developed and highly complex kind of society, and a novel that describes the coarse behavior and conventions of this society, it becomes a novel of manners. Okay, so we talk about the codified behavioral patterns, we talk about acceptable forms of speech, and such kinds of conventions dominate the story. Now, if you have read the novel in the earlier sections, do you come across any part where you feel that people also are very guarded when they talk? Can you give me example? Any example? People are very guarded when they talk. You have grown up with the same set of people, but you are very careful about what you say to the person sitting next to you. My page 21 and still chapter 3, Newland Archer enters the Beaufort ballroom. Wandering on the Bouton d'Or drawing room, where Beaufort had the audacity to hang Love Victorious, the much discussed nude of Bouguereau, Archer found Mrs. Wharton and her daughter standing near the ballroom door. Couples were already gliding over the floor beyond. The light of the wax candles fell on revolving tulle skirts, on girlish heads wreathed with modest blossoms, on the dashing aigrettes and ornaments of the young married women's coiffure, and on the glitter of highly glazed shirt fronts and fresh glassy gloves. The other day we were talking about clothes and how clothes make people. Now, this society is known for these. How are young women dressed? I think someone made a reference to Jezebel, and we were talking about the problem in Jezebel. She is that the girl is a non-conformist, and that is reflected even through the way she dresses up, and she comes out for a ball in which color? In a scarlet color, which is not the accepted color for a young unmarried woman. They are supposed to be more modest, because red is a scarlet after all. Okay, and a scarlet, you know the implications that the color carries. So, one has to be very careful about how one is dressed. So, Countess Olenska, when we first meet her at the ball, how is she dressed? She is wearing something called the Josephine look, because she comes from Europe, and Josephine look was getting very popular in Europe. Napoleon's wife. Okay, she used to wear a certain kind of design, a certain kind of a plainish gown, and with a headband, a tiara like band with diamonds. So, she was in that, but that is not what New York accepted. They wanted something more frilly and flouncy and more, because French customs had yet to enter the kind of clothes that she preferred. They were yet to enter the New York society. So, she was not stylish enough for them. So, that also is a mark. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone would want to say anything?
There's also a part where later on in the novel, they want to, all of them are not, they all have clothes from Paris which are very new, and they all have it in their wardrobe, but they store it for 2 years before they can wear it, because that's the custom.
The custom is that you shouldn't wear Parisian garments immediately, the moment of something becomes fashionable. For example, a palazzo. We have the fashion of palazzo. So, when did it start? 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But immediately if you start, you would come wearing a palazzo, then you would come across as some kind of a wannabe who really is trying a way too hard to become fashionable. Okay, so that's the way fashion works. So, give it some time. Yeah, let it, or asymmetrical dresses. Yeah, so it takes some time, and once it's established, then one can wear it. That was the custom of New York society. We don't wear whatever is in vogue right away. That's the idea. Okay, so clothes mattered a lot. And why do you think that when Beaufort had the audacity to hang the much discussed nude right in the corridor. What is the implication of this? We are talking about a famous painting, a nude by someone called Bouguereau, who is a very well known French painter, and to hang the nude here? Well, not where the ladies can look at it. This is not the way. Okay, so we don't have it, or don't hang such kinds of paintings in your corridors where people are entering the ballroom. Okay, it has to be more discreet. We are more modestly placed somewhere else, but not where everyone can see it right at the entrance. So, this is a part of the famous audacity of Beaufort. Okay, Beaufort's famous audacity. Yes, he throughout the novel, that's the way he behaves. So, there are a couple of non-conformist characters in this novel. Beaufort leads the bandwagon. We also have Catherine Mingot, the old grandmother, and then of course our heroine Ellen Olenska. Okay. Is Newland Archer a non-conformist? Yes or no?
The way he thinks, because we have access to his inner thoughts, he's something like Hamlet. He keeps thinking about things, but he never acts on it.
Okay.
So,
What does he actually do? In the entire novel, what does a Newland Archer actually do? What's his profession?
He's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer, but you know, lawyer was like a very euphemistic profession for these well-heeled aristocrats, because you need to give some semblance of occupation. So, they would go and attach themselves. It was a given that some big law firm will automatically take them. You have read The Bonfire of the Vanities, and you know that how certain kind of old world lawyers, they would automatically include the younger set, because your father was also with us once upon a time. So, it is the same kind of society. The Newland, he goes there, works and reads the newspapers, it's almost smokes a cigar, comes back. Okay. They were so wealthy, and they had so much of property from where they could earn their money, or they don't have to earn their living. They had an income which was also taken care by banks and their managers. They didn't really do work. They didn't actually perform any activity. So, they were supposed to be important members of the so-called society. Again, we are talking about novel of manners. After all, you can relate it to the theatre of manners. For example, Oscar Wilde. Yeah, what does that famous play, Importance of Being Earnest, what do those characters do? What do they do? They drink tea, they have sandwiches, they have cucumber, they have discussions over cheese sandwiches, butter sandwiches, cucumber sandwiches. Here too, characters talk a lot about food. Okay, what kind of food? So much of gossip takes place over the dinner table. Sir Walter Jackson, the old Sir Walter Jackson, who is also a member of this old New York society. He is invited to various people. Why? Because he is an expert on history. Family history of the old New York. He knows everything about everyone. The way Larry Laffer is an expert on? Larry Laffer is an expert on? She uses a word repeatedly. Good. Form. He is the only one in New York who knows whether on which occasion you should wear loafers or patent Oxford leather. Okay. His authority goes unchallenged over such matters, and Edith Wharton is very sarcastic when she says all these things. Okay. She is not taking them seriously, although she has the insider's view on all these things. So, this is novel, this is what I mean when we talk about novel of manners, okay. Very anthropological. Okay, so also we have to another salient feature is that characters are differentiated by the degree to which they measure up to or fall below the uniform standard or ideal of behavior. And naturally, when the novelist's concern was only a particular section of society, the range or scope always remains very limited. They do not talk about any other strata of society. They do not talk about the working class people. Okay, they do not, although Edith Wharton did try her hand at representing the poor people also, especially in Ethan Frome and the House of Mirth. But otherwise, more or less, these are novels, especially those written by people like Henry James, Jane Austen, and also Edith Wharton, which they have a limited range, but they excel within their limited range. Now, we come to another important person in both Edith Wharton and Henry James's life. This is a character, is a person called Morton Fullerton, and therefore we need to know why he is so important when we do the Age of Innocence. Now, he was a playboy, an American journalist who travelled widely, a socialite, and he had an affair with the person who was the model for Lord Henry in Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. So, the real life person, Lord Ronald Gower. Okay, so, this was the charismatic, the playboy Morton Fullerton. Now, James had drawn Henry James. He was a friend of Henry James, and he introduced Morton Fullerton to Edith Wharton also. And James had drawn on Morton for the journalist Merton Densher's character in The Wings of the Dove, and the hero is described as who looked vague without looking weak, idle without looking empty, and that was Morton Fullerton. Now, interestingly, because there is a lot of controversy about Henry James's personal life also, and he never married, and it was widely believed that he was bisexual. So, there may not be any concrete evidence, but it is believed that he was very much in love with Morton Fullerton at some point. Now, this is Morton Fullerton, who was considered a very stylish and fashionable gentleman of their times, of that time. Now, James, as we know, he corresponded a lot. He was a voracious letter writer, and he wrote to Fullerton at one point, and this is a preserved letter, so there is no doubt about its authenticity. You are dazzling, you are beautiful, you are more than tactful, you are tenderly, magically tactile, but you are not kind. There it is, you are not kind. Now, whatever you want to derive from this, why he is unkind. Okay. You absolutely add to my wish and to my need to live the life of whatever may call it my genius, and I shall feel somehow while there is a rag left of me, largely thanks to you. Okay, now why would a man write a letter of this kind to another man? One explanation, very simple explanation could be that men those days were less guarded about these things. You have done a lot of masculinity and theories of masculinity. So, you know that male bonding was not really always associated with homosexuality at a certain time in history. It is not, I mean, if you write a letter like this in today's time, there may be other implications attached to it. So, we are still not too sure about their exact relationship. However, Fullerton and Edith Wharton did have a very public affair, okay, while she was still married to her husband, Teddy Wharton, and we have already seen that she was not too happy with her marriage. So, Fullerton travelled to America with a letter of introduction to Edith Wharton from Henry James. Edith was 45, and she fell passionately and madly in love for the first time in her life, okay, because she married quite young, and she never loved passionately. She never loved her husband passionately. Okay. She did not have too many affairs, although there are some kind of gossip around her life, but this was the first time she fell. She, the raging fire of love, and this was the first time she fell. And interestingly, the age of innocence comes after all this, okay, after her roaring affair with Fullerton ended. He ditched her, okay, and she was shattered. This is Edith Wharton's house, the Mount. If you have seen if you just look it up on the YouTube, okay, there are documentaries on the Mount. So, this is the famous house that Edith Wharton built. Also, much of it was inherited, much of the land was inherited. We are told that it extends into some thousands of acres of land. There are forests, there are waterfalls and whatnot. Yeah, so she was a very wealthy woman. Money was never a concern. And at on the top of it, she earned a lot of money from through her writings also. During her own lifetime, some of her novels were bought by Hollywood for adaptation, for film adaptation. So, she was a very wealthy woman, okay. And she was one of the first people in America to own a luxurious car. This is her sanctuary. She called it a sanctuary, a retreat. So, this is what a retreat should be. All of us should have a retreat like this. So, this is the inside of a house, and this is her library. She was very fond of getting photographed in her library. Many of her pictures appear sitting and writing at her study table. Do remember, Virginia Woolf tells us something about, what is it? A woman should have a room of her own. Yeah. So, it is very important when a woman writes, she should have a place, a table and a chair and a fan and a room of her own, where she shouldn't be, or she shouldn't be disturbed. Okay, there shouldn't be any outside intervention when she writes. Why did she say that? What outside interventions are those?
In her times, women were not allowed that kind of space.
Women were not allowed. That writing is not a woman's job. Yeah, it is a scandalous job. So, why do women need to write at all? That was the popular perception. And if you, unless and until you have a space to write, how would you write? And they were denied that space. So, they wrote wherever it was possible. So, Virginia Woolf, when she first comes out with this famous lengthy prose about a room of her own, then this is what she means, that women need space and also solitude and also freedom from the day-to-day worries, how to run managing the household, running the house, taking care of everyone. Okay, you need some kind of a break from all those matters. So, remember, you as women of today, how lucky you are. Always, so make the most of your time and room of your own. Okay, this is a really a privilege and luxury. Whenever I look back on these women, I think how hard they have succeeded for us to enable to do whatever work we do today. Okay, so it's not our own work, but it's somebody else's labor that that we are reaping the fruits of. Now, this is I showed you the Mount and Edith Wharton's interest in house interior designing, and she also wrote a famous, very well recognized book called Italian Villas and Their Gardens. So, she was also extremely interested in landscaping, gardening and interior decoration. This I think I have already referred to the other day. How many of you have seen a movie called Becoming Jane? Becoming Jane. Whose movie is it? Yeah, it's about Jane Austen, and it's a fictionalized account of her affair with Tom Lafroy. Yeah. So, this in the movie, when it's like just giving you some kind of an imagined story about the circumstances that led to Jane Austen's writing of Pride and Prejudice. When the movie opens, we see Anne Hathaway beautifully dressed and sitting at her table and looking out of the window, and it's a beautiful pretty room, and she's looking out of the window, and there is a view of a beautiful garden out there. Okay, so what are we supposed to understand here? That Jane Austen had a place of her own where she would write all those magnificent novels while looking out of the window. And what did she see there? She would see all the beautiful landscaped gardens. Okay, right? Wrong, because she never had that kind of privilege. She lived in a house which was so crammed up and full of sisters and relatives, and whatever writing she did was on bits and scraps of papers, sitting amidst the huge chattering family. Okay, she never had a room of her own. Okay, so this is a romanticized representation. She never had a room of her own. So historians have challenged Becoming Jane, that this is, you are presenting a very wrong account of Jane Austen's work. She never had a place or room of her own. Okay, she wrote what, therefore her range was so limited. What else could she have written about? They say there is no reference to the major historical events, no reference to the decline and fall of the great Napoleon. How could she have? She didn't have access to everything that was happening around the world. Okay, she didn't have enough space to sit and read. She had to contribute towards household activities. Therefore, it was just not possible for her to write the way it's shown in the movie. Alright, so Edith Wharton in love, and her letters to Fullerton. So you have already seen Henry James's letters to love-lorn, heart-rending letters to Fullerton, and this is Henry Wharton. She says, "You hurt me, you disillusioned me, and when you left me, I was more deeply yours." This could as well be Newland Archer writing to Ellen Olenska. Okay. And she was shattered because he ditched her, and the very first and great love of her life, so late in life. And Henry James's advice was just live through it. Okay, you live through it because something valuable will come out of this pain and dejection, because she was a woman who had led such a privileged life. How would she know anything about pain? You need to suffer. That's what we are told in Rockstar, right? That philosophy of Rockstar, that unless you suffer, so he goes to all those crazy lengths to suffer. You need to suffer in order to produce real art, which is very true. Okay. So the idea is not that all of us turn into masochistic characters, but yeah, if an experience like this comes along, try to make the best of it. That's what Henry James's advice was, that something good will come out of it. And what came out of it? The Age of Innocence, which is about thwarted love. Yeah, a love that is not reciprocated in full measures, obsession, okay, a kind of passion that never attains consummation. So that kind of love. So she had gone through all this before she could come up with it. So if you read the novel, and the passages are of such great beauty, okay, that you will realize that what the author must have gone through. And this is a fictionalized representation of Edith Wharton and Fullerton's affair. It's called The Age of Desire. It's a 2012 novel by Jenny Fields, and you see Edith Wharton's, supposedly Edith Wharton's back looking out at a Parisian house, the kind of house that Edith Wharton lived in during the last days of her life in Paris. The Age of Desire. Look at the play on the title. She has also written, because the last years of her life, actually several years of her life were spent in France, in Paris, and she had written a book called French Ways and Their Meaning in 1919. So if you read this book, if you are interested, I would recommend that you read. She talks a lot about the Parisian way of life, the cultural scene in Paris during that time, and much of it finds resonance in The Age of Innocence. She says that in France one could truly exist as a self, an identity, a person, regardless of the way in which that person meshed or perhaps failed to mesh with society. So, what is the idea? In America you don't. And in America you don't, women don't get, especially women who live alone on their own, they cannot attain self actualization. So, this is very important in Edith Wharton, the idea of women attaining self actualization, gaining an identity. How many of you have read the end of the novel? Okay, so you tell me, Bhargavi, how does it end?
So I think Newland wants to leave his wife and okay, this is slightly before the end.
Yeah, tell me the end.
So he wants to go and meet her again, the countess, and he
At what age?
over 40 years old.
He's 57 then, exactly, yeah.
And he waits outside her house debating whether to go in or not, and finally he decides to
Not to go and visit her after all. That's the way the novel ends. He ends up marrying May Wallen. He never finds complete, it's not a passionate relationship or partnership that he had envisaged for himself, that's not, but he knows that with Ellen there could have been something deeper, something more honest, and he never attains that. At one point he wants to leave his wife and escape with Ellen, but then certain circumstances that once we start doing the novel, then we will talk about those also. But the novel ends when May is already dead and he is 57 and the Countess is living all by herself in Paris, and he goes there, he goes to Paris and he sits on a bench looking up at the house where she lives, in one of those top floor houses, and he just waits and waits and waits for what? Just like Hamlet. For what? She is not going to come to the window. Yeah, but he just sits there. He sends his son up there, his son who is now in his 20s and so, but he waits down and Countess is expecting him. We are told that she is waiting inside, but he never goes up there. And when the evening closes, he returns, he goes back to his hotel. Okay, now why does he do that?
What we see, he keeps trying to make a move, make a decision, and he fails. And the end is also the final failure. He refuses to act again because of all the structures around him that prevent him from doing so.
Yeah. So this is a man who is a product of his society. Okay, he is a very passive man. Yeah, but then very interestingly, the entire story is told to us through a very restricted point of view, the man's perspective, and this is another accomplishment for Edith Wharton. Being a woman in the 19th century America, she could, this novel was written in 20th century of course, so then she could probe into the psyche of a man so deeply. Okay, she understands the male psychology so well. So, he is unable to take decisions at every crucial moments of his life, whereas for women it is not a problem. They know what they want, both of them. Women emerge much more stronger than Newland Archer, although he thinks he is taking most of the decisions, but it is not. He remains a passive character, things happen to him, he does not make anything, he is another Clyde Griffiths character. Okay, things happen to him. Yeah, women come, they sit next to him, they may, things are done for him. He never does anything. The only thing that he actually does is getting married to May. That also because it has the entire social sanctions associated with that, but on his own there nothing that he, but in his mind we see a lot of conflict happening all the time. He questions a lot, but at the same time he accepts everything, he learns to live with that. So, Edith Wharton, why did I talk about the ending of the novel at all? Edith Wharton very interestingly had written 3 drafts of the novel. In the first draft they do get married. He leaves May and marries Countess Olenska, and they get married. She gets bored with him. Yeah. And why does she get bored with him? And she leaves him. She says that I am going to go back to Europe. Yeah, so that is one of the endings. Okay, you can look up the net and where it and there is another where I think one is they live happily after, one is when they get married and they don't live happily after, and one is where he marries May and then he never leaves May. May dies, but even when he is free he does not want to be with, or he cannot bring himself to go to Olenska once more. Okay, so now what are we looking at? We are looking at a kind of a man who is not able to take certain very decisions which are life changing. Okay, but the woman is. Okay, so the woman for Edith Wharton was always the agency that could bring about certain changes. This is what she felt about America. She did not have much too great an opinion about the American cultural or intellectual scene, and she says that America dominated by requisites of social class and mandates of what it is to be a good citizen, and that is what she did not want to. In Paris, in Europe, you get some freedom to exercise your own self, your choices, your identity. Okay, you can be, but in America you are forced to become a model citizen in the society in which she existed, and the idea of a single woman existing, it was just not possible. One has to have a man. So, that is what she felt, that in France you have that sense of loose collection of free spirits coming together and actually promoting self realization, self actualization. This is Edith's home in Paris, and if if you watch the movie, Scorsese's film, this is so much like the house where Ellen Olenska passes the remaining of her day, and this is where Newland Archer sitting on the bench looking up to this house. This is the locality where Edith Wharton was staying in France. It is a locality of Faubourg Saint-Germain. And then we will also talk about the cosmopolitanism in her works. So, Edith Wharton herself was a very cosmopolitan person, self-educated. The other day we were talking about that she did not really receive any formal kind of education, but her education came mainly through foreign travels, just like Ellen Olenska's, just like Newland Archer's. Of course, he is a trained lawyer, but then he was a man and she was a woman in the 19th century. So, look at the similarities between Olenska and Archer on one hand and on Edith Wharton on the other. So, both and all of them self-educated mainly through foreign travels, instructed in foreign languages. There is a lot of Italian and French throughout the novel. Okay, that is what Edith Wharton was proficient in. She was highly interested in European languages, interest in the best artistic world, several references to paintings, housekeeping, gardening, flowers. What is Newland's flower? There is always a flower which he keeps in his buttonhole. Gardenia, white gardenia. Okay. And did you notice that when we are first introduced to May Wallen, where is she? She is sitting in the box, the Mingott box, with her aunt, and Countess Olenska, and she is wearing a modest white. Modesty is always the very recurring, frequently recurring adjective with good young girls. So, they are modest, and she is wearing a modest white gown, and everything held together, clasped at the bosom with a white gardenia. So, the man is having a gardenia in his buttonhole, and the girl, his betrothed, is having a gardenia at her, somewhere in her dress, tucked away somewhere in her dress. And she has in her hands what? She is holding a bouquet of white lilies, lilies of the valleys, and this is a bouquet that has been sent to her by Newland Archer. Okay, so this was the custom, and everything in white, because white suggests everything in white. Yeah, so white suggests purity, chastity, virginity, modesty. Okay, so white girl playing with flowers, lily of the valley flowers in a bouquet given to her by her fiancé, who is also having a gardenia, white gardenia in it. So, this is a sort of signifier at work. Okay, they are one, they have the same kinds of tastes, and she is playing with her bouquet, eyes lowered and all. So, this is a way a modest girl should sit, and he looks at her, the first time he looks at her, he sees her holding that bouquet that he had just sent to her, and she is playing with the lilies of the valley, white flowers, and he draws in a breath which is full of vanity and self-satisfaction. Okay, why vanity and self-satisfaction? He takes great pride in her. See, I am so lucky that I have snagged a woman like that. Okay. She is the cynosure of every eye, but there is a stain there, there is a smudge there. Wow, what's that? Countess Olenska's presence, okay, in Josephine style gown.
I think she's wearing black.
No, she is wearing blue. She is wearing blue. She came out, and that is another cross against her. They had these coming out seasons. So, when she came out in in society, that's her debut ball. She was allowed to wear black. Okay, she was allowed to wear black, and black is not something that a good girl should be seen wearing, a good unmarried girl. So, colors, clothes signify a lot in this. So, yeah, so she was, this is something that is referred to throughout the novel, that oh, what else can you expect from a girl whose upbringing was so unconventional that she wore a black gown at her coming out ball. See, this class of women would have these balls that was called their, they were the debutantes. They come out, they are formally introduced to society that now this girl is in the marriage market. She is ready for the masculine attention. So, when she is presented to society in black gown, that means something is terribly wrong with her upbringing. She should have worn something more becoming, like a pale or a pastel or lavender or something, or white is the safest choice, of course, for unmarried women. And of course, then their love for literature, so much of novel is full of what they read. They live their lives through books. They are what they read. Newland's ideas are all informed by his books, the books he reads. So much till he comes face to face with a woman like Countess Olenska, who is a real woman of, who has so much of passion and fire in her. Okay, but till then, all his whatever he knows about love and deep desires, he has learnt only through books. Okay. All right, so we will continue this in our next class. Thank you.